you want to put out a good press release, right? So your first announcement would be something along the lines of, you've given it optimal conditions, you've given it lots of everything. It might not be economical, but you don't know that yet. You've just said that I did this and I got 96% recovery, but that, you might have added 3 kilos a tonne of cyanide, or you might have ground it to 10 microns, which in the practical sense is never going to happen. But if you in the test work, yes, it's correct. That's what you got. Would I build a plant like that? No, I wouldn't.
What's it saying, Matty?
Nothing like an episode brought to you by Bingo. Oh, Spinner, we're running out, and we've got a bloody stakeholder here as well. Him and Spinner are like this. The great. Now, sorry, I'm not going to say the great Nathan Stoitis. I'm not going to even say where you work because, as you said, you don't want any company advertisement because you don't want any. You got too much work already.
Pretty busy, mate. Yeah, pretty busy.
Mate, the infamous metallurgical episode that we've promised to many people is here. You took a bit of family pressure to get you over the line, eh?
Yeah, mate. The sun was on to me every day. Dad, you're going on the show, so here we are.
Oh, very good, mate. Welcome, boys.
We're all the better for it, mate.
Oh, geez, I better get bloody this is one I can't do off the cuff.
You're that jam-packed for work at the moment, Nathan, that we wanted to plan this episode for a long time, but you put us in the calendar about 5 months, ahead of schedule. That's the only time we could slip in. So we're keen to unpack your metallurgical expertise in this episode. If you're a company and you need some metallurgical expertise, don't reach out to Nathan. He doesn't.
He's not available.
He's too fucking busy. You won't get him for another 5 months.
If you're not on the book, stay off.
Do we have to pay you for that ad now? Because it's like a reverse ad. Oh, mate, geez, what do we we've got a bit to go through.
All right. It's going to be the shortest, most boring episode ever, but we'll have a crack, right?
Hey, mate, every metallurgical myth that is out there, the history of the bloody good ones, the bad ones, we're going to go through it. Where are we going to start?
Well, the thing I always think about with Met is like, we can be so excited about projects. Like the market gets excited, you get ahead of yourself, you get so pumped up because you see grade and you think the economics all work, but Met is that thing that just can absolutely create a binary outcome of this is a complete fucking dud or it's going to be great. And that's why it's intriguing because as investors who don't have technical ability to pass that, it's such a risk for you when you get involved in stuff. And I'm keen to just tease out why we should pay more attention to Met and what are the things that we should really be paying attention to.
Yeah, that's a good one. So historically, someone mentioned something that's all grade related or head grade related, and the GOs go nuts and the shares go nuts. And then you look behind the scenes, you look at the metallurgy, you go, well, that doesn't sort of make sense, or it's not quite right. And we're getting more and more ore bodies that are like that. In the early days, you had a sniff of cyanide, mix it up, and you make bars of gold, right? Whereas now we're getting to the refractory stuff, which you guys have covered. There's a few other things that can sort of hurt you from a Met point of view. And we're also getting into these critical metals that no one really understands how to process yet. So they announce these really high lithium grades or rare earth grades, which is good. Niobium is another one, right? But then what do you do with it? How do you actually extract it and make it value? So there is a lot of effort that has to go into the metallurgy side of things to make it a good project.
And it often comes back to grade, right? You were saying just before the show, there's a lot of thinking goes in, a lot of planning, a lot of money goes into these projects, but grade is still the key ingredient, and it can make and it can break projects, right?
Absolutely, right. That's one of the biggest things for, when you're working on a feasibility study, a pre-feasibility study, you've got to rely heavily on the geologist's interpretation of an ore body, and then they've got to give you the right samples to do the Met test work on. If that ore body is out by 10, 20, 30% based on what the math says, then that could make the project really bad.
It's the grade of what's going through the mill, not the grade of what was in the announcement 6 months ago.
Exactly, mate. And look, it's almost like a standing joke between geologists and metallurgists. We sort of hate each other because the GOs will go, it's 10 gram dirt, we'll process it and go, it's more like 4, right? And then they go, but it mustn't be, where have you lost it? So they're running around your plant doing audits to try and find this gold that never existed, right? It happens a lot. And that's one of the biggest disconnects where a project can fail is the head grade is primarily the big one. And it could be not just gold, right? It could be copper, lead, zinc, could be all three, could be all, depends on what it is. And then there's also, if you're going to go into the polymetallics, you've got payables for each different metal, right? So you've got to allocate a grade and recovery to lead. You've got to allocate a grade and recovery to zinc and to silver. If you get them wrong or you get too much lead in your zinc con or too much zinc in your lead con, it's not payable. And that's where the metallurgical part becomes really important.
And that's one of the questions I wanted to ask, and we sort of discussed it before, was what have been some of the big metallurgical or processing mishaps in mining history. But from what you're saying there, most of those so-called mishaps are the grade wasn't as bloody good as was first thought.
Pretty much, but yeah, like you might have stuffed something up from an engineering point of view where you might have not have enough residence time or something like that, or your float saws aren't big enough, but generally it's grade related. You know, you've designed to our grade, you've designed to output a certain amount of metal or ounces per year, and if it doesn't come in the door, the mill can only do so much.
And because if those issues do arise, they can be usually fixed, not easily, but like added on or fixed. Like you can't fix grade.
No, you can't fix grade, right? So then what happens is the pressure comes to the mill, is that right? Yeah. So you've got a mill designed to do 2 million tonnes per annum, just to make up a number. And then they go, right, the grade's not there. We've got to do 2.5 million tonnes now. We need to get that throughput up to hit our ounce rate or our metal output rate for the month. So it sort of falls back on the mill to overperform, whether it's tonnes or grade or tonnes and recovery, to try and match the head grade that wasn't there in the first place.
I love that. You always see that in ramp up where there's been a bit of a catastrophe on ramp up, and you always see the company talk about optimizing the plant to improve recoveries, right? And what are they actually doing? They're compensating for the fact that grade's not what they thought it would be a lot of the time.
It doesn't happen always, but that's exactly, you'll get someone come down and say, right, more tonnes. We need to get the throughput up to get the metal out the door.
Is the issue that oftentimes, diligent enough work wasn't actually done in the study phase. I mean, I remember, what's a recent one? Sometimes these companies have fast track to production strategies. Core Lithium comes to mind. And if you looked at the DFS for that, recovery was just a fucking straight line. It was like they assumed it was like 80% recovery for entire life of mine.
Yep.
And
DMS only.
Yeah. And I mean, is that something you look at and you just think like that's insufficient study detail?
Yes. Like it's funny from a metallurgical point of view, you look at a lot of press releases and some of them are put out by geologists and you just look at it and technically you go, that doesn't make sense. Like I read one years ago, and we were crushed to 75 microns, right? 75 microns is the size after milling. There's no way you're going to crush to 75 microns.
Yeah.
So you read those little things. And then a lot of the time it also comes back to the size of the company. If it's a junior that's cash strapped, they haven't had much money to spend on test work. Or they haven't drilled that many holes, but they need to put out some good news releases, right? So they'll grab whatever holes they've got, they'll do some basic test work on it, pick the best targets and make a release.
This is a thing that I actually didn't even appreciate until we did the show, and that's that. Like I used to read these releases when it would be initial met test work, and you look at the results. It says the recovery is X, and I didn't quite comprehend that recovery is a function of grade. So when you say there's issues with grade reconciliation, that actually makes your recoveries lower as a result of that.
Correct.
How is that relationship like? Is it just a linear relationship between grade and recovery, or how does it work?
It's not really linear, and it's all dependent, but it's just maths, right? So it's harder to get a higher percent recovery on a lower number. So if you've got a 10 gram ore body and you're throwing away 1 gram, it's 90% recovery. So that sounds really good. 1 gram's not a good thing to throw away, but it sounds good, right? Now, if that ore body's now 5 grams and you're throwing away 1 gram, it's 80% recovery, I think.
Is that sort of how it works? Like say for gold?
Every ore is different, right? So some ore bodies almost have like a fixed tail and the head grade just varies, and others are more, it will vary, the tails grade will vary with the head grade.
And we talk about, the mishaps or ramp ups and everything. I assume it's a function of like minerals that are very understood or not understood metallurgically. Like lithium, for instance, we talk about the ramp up of a flotation plant. Like, Pilbara Minerals took 18 months or so to get it to what they're doing today.
Yep.
Whereas would you class lithium metallurgy compared to gold in terms of just the amount of time that's been done and the actual understanding of it metallurgically?
Yep.
Very different?
Very, very different, right? So if you said, I want to build a gold plant or a copper float plant or a lead zinc float plant, we could get mets and engineers and design guys to knock you one up pretty quickly, right? And you'd have confidence that it would run well. Whereas lithium, it's quite new processing. It's got new technology. It's more of a chemical plant than it is a mineral processing plant. And we don't have the depth of experience in the metallurgists to run these things. So it was my understanding that when lithium first took off, a lot of these guys were building the plant, but the flotation hadn't been finalised yet in the test work stage, because you had to be the first person to build the plant to make money on the boom. If you were later, you missed it, but the plant hadn't been designed yet. And it was probably designed cheaply with no standby pumps and stuff like that. So the operational side of it wouldn't have been that easy.
Our former guest, Joe Lowry, would be pretty stoked to hear that you called lithium a chemical rather than a commodity there.
If he's feeling that, he's not in the news as much now, so he doesn't get as many invites.
Maybe it'd be back.
Not feeling the love.
How else do you think about the initial MET test work results that you see from a company? Is it very much dependent on what you said there? If it's a newer commodity in a sense, then you take it with a pinch of salt, whereas if it comes from gold, the process is a bit more understood? Or is it new ore, you have to, collate a bit more data and get a feel for them over time?
Yeah, so it's a bit of both. The new ore is definitely a big one, right? If you've got an ore body where no one else has really processed in the past and there's no data, then if you were to give me the sample, I would throw the sink at it. I would grind the absolute crap out of the ore. I would add a shit ton of cyanide into it, and I would leach it for 48 hours. And that would give me the best outcome I could for that client, right? And then based on that data, then we chop and change the flow sheet depending on what the test work shows us.
And what are the other tricks that companies sort of do to make the initial test work look good? Like, we've heard of the tricks that, you use perhaps higher grade drill results that are not quite as representative as what the reserve or what the resource may be when that eventually comes out. But are there other tricks that you look out for that perhaps try and deceive punters out there?
I don't know about deceive, but you want to put out a good press release, right? So, basically your first announcement would be something along the lines of, you've given it optimal conditions. You've given it lots of everything to give you the best outcome. It might not be economical, but you don't know that yet. You've just said that I did this and I got 96% recovery. But that, you might have added 3 kilos a tonne of cyanide, or you might have ground it to 10 microns, which in a practical sense is never going to happen. Yep. But if you in the test work, yes, it's correct. That's what you got. Would I build a plant like that? No, I wouldn't.
So they're the sorts of rules of thumbs or quick things you look out for, is like the grind size, the grade of the product, these sorts of things.
So the grind size, the grade, and the residence time. For gold mines, that's the sort of stuff I look at. And then for base metals, it's really about the grade recovery curve, being able to achieve an acceptable grade under the right recoveries. You don't want to see a linear grade recovery curve. It's got to sort of taper off.
So when you say 75 micron, is that what you consider a normal grind size coming out the arse of a ball mill? Or
yep. So
that's pretty standard?
Yeah, so ball mills, again, some guys grind as coarse as, say, 250 microns. And if you've got an ore body like that, you're loving life, right? And there's a few around in WA. And then you've got... So the Ramilius guys ran coarse. The Regis guys run pretty coarse.
Yep.
That's all that comes to mind at the moment. But that's just...
Because they can.
The ore body lets you, right? It's a function of the ore body.
Yeah.
And then if you've got other sort of ore bodies, you've got to go 75 microns, you're starting to push the friendship. Well, you can do that pretty well. 53 microns out of a ball mill, you're really starting to push it. And anything finer than that, you need to go to ultra-fine grinding.
Yeah, and which is... KCGM.
KCGM sort of stuff. Yep.
No, we'll get in. Should we do gold? Should we go through gold?
One more question in the broad stroke of things, and
then we can bring it in.
I'm very keen to. It's sort of in the line of JD's line of questioning there, and another thing that we were spoken to about today was in relation to getting these samples. So you like an ore body might have 22 different ore types, but then in a bit of doing the test work, it kind of gets narrowed down, and the variability of the entire ore body might not be captured because you've reduced it down to 4 samples, which might be not at all representative of the full ore body. Is that something you come across pretty regularly in your work?
You see that sort of stuff early on in a stage of a project that hasn't got an existing mine. So the guys that have got existing mine, they know all that, and those guys are pretty good. It's the juniors. So typically when we sit down with the geologist to say, like, give me some samples, they pull out the cross sections, they pull out all the drill results, and you say to them, right, where are most of your ounces within this ore body, right? And then you would focus on that to make a composite of that. And if that's the bit that they're going to mine first and they're going to design everything to, that's the sort of ore body that you do most of your test work on. But you're right, if you take samples from oxide, transition, and fresh from all over the place and composite it could make your ore body look either amazing or terrible because you haven't done that correctly.
I've got one more sort of general one, Stoitis. When should a company hire a metallurgist? At what stage do you think, they should really have one on board. Obviously, it's like sort of depending on where they are, but when they're migrating from being just a pure exploration company into developing an asset, is there a point where you think they shouldn't be outsourcing it anymore and they should really have someone, or does that get into the complexity of what the project is?
It's a complexity of the project, and you don't really need metallurgists on the ground from day one. You'll need them to talk with the geologist, to get the samples together, to composite it up, to develop a flow sheet, and then to manage the test work for you from a production point of view. But then you might not need that skill set, that metallurgist's skill set, to be your production metallurgist, right? They're very different skill sets. Design, test work management versus operations and commissioning are generally different skill sets. So you probably don't need to hire a met. I don't know if anyone wants to hear me say that, but you don't want to hire a met too early. Use consultants in fits and starts, if you want to say it, to get the outcome you need, and then just go with the project as it goes through its stages.
Gotcha. Should we talk gold?
What commodities need a metallurgist straight away?
Oh, yeah, so lithium and that sort of stuff you want. Lithium, rare earths.
Make them the MD.
Which is a bit cool. Lithium, rare earths, that sort of stuff. You really need to be on top of the metallurgy. Niobium is another one that's coming up these days more and more.
Yeah.
And the metallurgy makes and breaks those sort of projects.
Right, gold, boys. Now, gold's one, like, we obviously tried to overly simplify it in terms of your free gold, your free milling gold, and refractory.
Yep.
But I think today let's hone in on the in-betweens. So say if, like, something's a good free milling ore body, which is, responds to cyanide, piece of piss, then you've got refractory, which is pain in the arse territory. Where's the bits in the middle, like the things that are free milling, but things that can sort of make things difficult with cyanide consumption and recoveries? What are they?
Right. So cyanide consumption's a big one, and that's generally around copper minerals, right? So if you've got a gold project that has oxide copper species, you're in trouble, right? So the oxide copper species are cyanide soluble, like very cyanide soluble. The rule of thumb around most mets is that 1% cyanide soluble copper uses 30 kilograms a tonne of cyanide, right? And as an example, most mine sites around WA run 0.5 to 0.6 kilos of cyanide per tonne of ore, so it's quite low. So as a rule of thumb, about 300 ppm cyanide soluble copper is a limit you would want to run to. There's ways to manage it in the process. You do what's called a cold cyanide wash and stuff. But when it starts getting higher, the process just dissolves so much copper, it uses up all your cyanide, it loads up onto your carbon, and it creates what's called a wad cyanide issue in the tails dam as well, right? So that is a big one. And
that cyanide issue, is it?
Yes, it's called weak acid dissociable cyanide.
Yep.
And it's basically cyanide that's bound up with copper and other stuff, but when it acidifies, it comes back into free cyanide again. And is available for animals to ingest.
Rightio. Yep. So that, and which, there's one copper that doesn't do this.
Chalcopyrite is only about
Chalcopyrite's
5-6% cyanide soluble.
Yeah, and what's the worst ones again?
Malachite and azurite. Malachite, azurite, chalcocite, and bornite. If you've got that and cyanide, you're in a world of hurt.
So, and what'd you say? Anything above 300 ppm, you're starting to...
Give or take, around 300 ppm cyanide soluble copper, which is the copper that dissolves when you add the cyanide to it.
Yeah, and for I think we explained it in the episode before, like 300 ppm is the same as 300 grams per tonne. So it means you got that much, and you got a 5 gram ore body, so you got bloody 60 times as much copper chewing cyanide as the gold. And does the cyanide go, like say you got cyanide soluble copper and the gold, does it just go to both?
Yeah, so
per normal, or
usually
does it favourably
it probably favours the copper a little bit.
Yeah.
Right, and then it also causes you problems with your absorption onto your carbon. And copper actually forms different what's called cyanide complexes. So whereas gold and cyanide join almost 2 to 1, I think it is.
Yeah.
The copper can be 2 coppers, 1 copper, 2 cyanides, 2 coppers, 3 cyanides. There's all these different molecules that can form.
Yeah, right. So the ones that do take a lot of where the higher copper ones where they're using a bit more cyanide, but they're managing it, and the doré bars are getting poured at, I don't know, 50, 60% gold, and the rest is copper.
Yep.
How does that affect? Do they still get paid?
Yep, the mint doesn't care.
So they get,
or whoever you sell it to doesn't care.
They pay for the they only pay for the 60% of gold, but
correct.
don't they?
Gold and silver.
Yeah, and how do they know the percentage? Does the company assay it or the mint assays it?
You both do, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
when you pour a bar of gold, you'll either use a drill to get some shavings out of it, or you do a vacuum tube, and then that sample is kept until after it's sent to the refiner, and then you compare your assay with their assay. If they're close, you tick. If they're apart from each other, you go to a third-party umpire, and whoever they're the closest to, you pay on that.
Yeah, right. The video ref.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. No, that process has been done for years and years.
Yeah, right. So what operations are there out there that you haven't worked on or not working with that are on the fringe but have to manage copper in their ore body without going down the road of, say, a deflector where they've actually got to run a flotation circuit and a copper concentrate?
That'd be pretty much the only one that I can think of that has real big copper issues.
Yep.
I'm just trying to think of other ones. Telfer is a massive one. That copper for them is a huge issue.
Yeah.
To the point where they've got a SART plant, which is a cyanide recovery plant, but they need to send the waste solution from that, the copper cyanide recovered solution from that, to a dump leach. So Telfer is a big one, and then deflector.
So how do you think about refractory ore bodies? That's the sort of, cross of death or whatever when it comes to gold projects. It's a bit of a curse. People don't like to hear it. But I'm sure there's, a bunch of thoughts around refractory that probably irks you a bit, given you've got a much deeper understanding than most people that talk about it.
Yeah, so refractory, it's the ore bodies aren't either yes or no refractory, right? There's the whole suite in between, right? So if it's free milling, it's 90% plus recovery, pretty straightforward. Sniff for cyanide, everyone's happy. Then you get the semi-refractory stuff that's between sort of 80 to 70% recovery in that range.
So is that super pit?
Super pit's
Semi?
like that, yeah. So super pit is refractory or semi-refractory. So they used to have the Gidgee roaster, which is what they used to. So you float a concentrate off, you send it to the roaster, you oxidise it, you leach it, and that's how they treat it, right? But now what they do is they ultra-fine grind it instead. So
And what's that go down to? 53?
10 microns.
Oh, 10 microns.
So pretty
Wow.
fine. Yeah.
I'd use a good bit of power.
Yeah, and you have special mill equipment like ISA mills or HIG mills, and there are these different sorts of equipment to do it, which is why you would only do it on a flotation concentrate, because it costs you so much more for power to get it to that size. Now, KCGM responds well to ultra-fine grinding. Not as good as roasting. So roasting will give you your best recovery.
Yep.
Ultra-fine grinding will give you an acceptable recovery, but you don't run the roaster.
Yeah. So to get it down to 10 micron,
Yep.
like they do there, is it literally beyond a ball mill? Like, say when you get it to 75 in a normal, what we class as a normal circuit.
Yep.
To then grind it down to that 10, does it then just go straight into a leach tank?
Yes, yeah. So you'll go through a different stage of grinding, so an ISA mill or a HIG mill, like I mentioned, or some other different type of mill, and then it just leaches like normal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's ore bodies that can do that, right? And then you get some ore bodies that you'll grind at 10 microns, you'll add a shitload of cyanide, still won't leach for you.
Yeah,
right. They're the ones.
Wouldn't that piss you off?
Yeah.
After getting it that small.
That's the whole point of
That'd
it.
annoy you.
That's the whole refractoriness, right?
What's the contributing factor at KCGM? Is it salt? Like, is it arsenic or is it sulfide encapsulation? What is it?
I'd have to look through my notes, mate, but it's probably just what they call arsenic-based solid solution, I think it's called. So it's just a level of refractoriness that has with it. Again, might get told off by some of my mates, but it's in that.
That's all right. You don't want any
It's in that
work
range.
anyway.
The good thing about KCGM is you grind it to bug dust, it leaches fine, right?
Yeah.
And you don't need an oxidation step, whether it's don't need a roaster or a pressure oxidation or something like that.
What other options would they have besides would it be a big, massive, bloody POX plant?
Yeah, so there's a big POX plant is like the sledgehammer approach.
Yeah.
The roaster, which obviously,
People don't like them.
KB's a roaster, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the last roaster left in WA, isn't it?
Yep. And then you've got
Albion? Is that
Albion? That's the one I was thinking of.
Oh, mate, Sam, fucking mate.
You could be a man.
Oh, good.
Might have a job for you, mate. And which is just basically grind it to bug dust and then just add a heap of oxygen in it to try and oxidise it.
But to put a POX plant in for a 27 million tonne operation like KCGM would be
Huge.
That'd be just. But does the POX plant just introduce a shitload more complexities? Or would you go, are they easy to run or hard to run? Once again.
Well, look, Lahair's been doing it for years. They got 4 of them there.
Yeah.
They're easy to run, but they got to be kept steady. You can't just go, oh, I'm out of ore today, let's just turn it off and we'll start it up again on Thursday. It doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah, why is that?
Because they got to be hot. They run hot. You can't run them hot then cold, or hot then cold. You got to flush them out and all that sort of operational stuff. So when you're running an oxide, an autoclave, it's just got to keep it going and then plan your shutdowns.
Yeah, righto.
Right. And does that mean you ultimately need like very little variability in the feed that's going through?
100%.
Right. So if you have a variable ore body, you got to blend it.
Yeah, if you've got a variable ore body or you've got multiple ore body sources,
Yeah.
which is oxide transition and fresh is typically the way it works, your mining guys need to be on the ball, or you've got to be so ahead of your mining that you're just picking up stockpiles and putting them through your plant as much as you can to keep everything as steady as possible.
Trav, I reckon you've strategically just done that so well because you're leading into De Grey, aren't you?
I think so. I mean, we look at
We've been beating around the bush
Yeah.
for 5 minutes now.
we look at De Grey and granted it's study phase, so it's all that stuff's ahead of them, and in some ways, the people there might actually be thinking it's someone else's problem, and you present the best story and leader. But they've got like a high grade kind of starter pit, and then you kind of lead into some of the lower grade things along the way, and that's great for financing a gold project because you get earlier payback. But if their processing technique is POX, do you think that there would be some challenges associated with that kind of processing plan?
From a metallurgical point of view, yes. Like I said, you need float plants and then POX plants because they're going to float a concentrate and then POX the concentrate, right? It's got to be consistent. So you need to have like sulfur levels need to be maintained. And if you look at an ore body, again, it doesn't always, but it goes oxide, transition, and fresh, right? Fresh you can float till the cows come home. Pyrite flotation is one of the easiest things to do. Transition is a problem child because it's some sulfide, some oxide. It doesn't know what it is, right? It doesn't magically have like little lines where the miners go and pick it up. And then oxide, you can't float oxide gold. Free gold floats, but you can't make a concentrate out of it, right? So yes, you would need to have a really good handle on the mining and the metallurgical characteristics of each of those pits to make sure you get the POX running smooth.
So what do they do with the oxide there? That'll just go through a separate cyanide circuit, does it?
Yeah, I think their tails will just go through to a leach. Yep.
Yeah, righto. Yep. Oh, so they'll even once the POX is going, they'll have a tail coming out the arse end of that.
Yeah, and then you would put a CIL circuit on that.
And,
yes.
and that'll treat the oxide as well.
Yeah, so you've just gone through all this effort to grind it anyway, right? You put in some tanks, bit of a circuit, and recover a little bit more.
So to simplify it, and it never is as simple as that, but is a case like De Grey when you've got multiple pits and everything, the level where you take the ore is nearly more important than the grade of the ore when you're processing it. Like, does it nearly have to be either all oxide or all fresh or all transitional to know what you're dealing with, or will they blend the transitional down to an acceptable limit so it doesn't have as much of an effect?
That's a good question. In a perfect world, and again, I don't know much about the De Grey plant, but you would mine the oxide first, slam that through your CIL circuit if it's not refractory, get some cash flow, and then while you're building the rest of the plant, the POX plant, and you hit those transitional and fresh stuff, then start using that as feed to the autoclave.
Yeah, right. So, but it's not as easy sometimes as having shitloads of multiple pits all at a bloody going at the same pace.
Yeah.
Is it?
And
you
got
want to
mining
get to
costs.
the high grade, so then you got a bit of fresh, then you're starting the oxide there, and
Yep.
yeah,
With De Grey as well. I mean, there's no doubt it's a deposit of scale. Like there's
10 million
ounces
tonne.
there, whatever. So it's big, right? But then they don't have grade on their side. So do you think there's when you see kind of a large deposit, but headline grade of like 1 gram per tonne, there or thereabouts, do you as a met like intuitively just think there's not very much room for error when it comes to getting things right as a result of that?
So you've only got a gram to play with, right? So what most people do is go, well, I've got a gram, I've got heaps of tonnes, I'll build a big plant because it's just economies of scale, right?
Yeah.
But if you're going to be putting in a POX plant, then that's more capital that you need to put in. So it's an interesting one, right? So, getting back to it, 1 gram free milling is easy. 1 gram, then it comes back to OPEX. What's it going to cost to run my POX plant? They use a lot of oxygen, they use a lot of power. And every time you have a different unit process within a process, it's got to run efficiently or your recovery drops. So your float circuit's got to run effectively, your POX plant has to run effectively, your CIO circuit has to run effectively. It just becomes another cost within that process, but with a fixed amount of gold.
If you had a 1 gram free milling ore body, what would be the equivalent refractory? What would you compare that to as a refractory grade to say it's sort of the same? Economics and complexity wise.
You'd probably be about 1.5, 1.6-ish, just shooting from the hip.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, chuck figures. It's like an all-in sustaining cost.
Yeah, mate.
Right, throw 50% on top, mate.
It's just adding autoclaves or roasters or another stage. It's just another unit process within the process that has a cost. It's all it is, right?
Yeah, right. What's the best gold ore bodies you've ever seen metallurgically?
That's a very good question. I don't know if we rate them. I just do the work and move on.
You've been to the Perth Mint, mate. Seen the gold bars? They're great.
That's all you do.
See, that's a funny one, right? So I had this saying I said to some clients a while ago is a really easy ore body is great for the client, shit for the metallurgist, right? Because it's just add a bit of cyanide, it works. Whereas a complex ore body like a de Grey or a refractory ore body or something like that, it's not about the client, but for the met, it's awesome. Because you're going to send so much work my way to try and work out a path to process this ore body.
And everyone loves complex problems to solve.
Oh,
so,
jeez.
yeah.
The little metallurgist in me does it. The commercial person, not so much.
Have you seen many gold mines change through mining when everything's pretty stable, and then the metallurgy sort of changes unexpectedly?
Just to add a layer to that, I'd love to ask you about Wiluna, right?
Yep.
Because,
Ooh.
mate, surely that's changed over time as well.
That's changed heaps.
Tell me,
Yeah.
how? Why?
Well, they've then put a float circuit in towards the end there as well. That didn't go well for them.
Yeah.
Well, there was some other commercial issues, as I understand it, around that.
Was it the oxide stuff was pretty simple to process, but then it's the sulfide.
Correct.
Has been a big challenge.
Yeah, that's where the refractoriness comes from, is the sulfides, not the oxide part. Yeah. Yep. So getting back to I'll get to that.
Yes.
Again, your question is, a lot of the times the ore body doesn't change too much because if you've done the work correctly, you know what it is. What happens is when that ore body's extinguished and the plant still sits there, and there's another bloke next door who goes, I've just bought this plant to process my dirt. It was never designed to do your dirt, but it might do, right? You don't know until you do some test work. So the met doesn't change too much if you've done your met test work correctly. It's what happens to the asset that's been sitting there, that's been exhausted, if someone's got pits next door and put it through, because it was never designed for that ore body.
So to that point, one that comes to mind is Spartan, and I'll disclose that I own a couple, but I'm intrigued because a lot of people throw around this term about right-sizing the plant. Currently 2.5 million tonne per annum, but what they've found at Never Never seems to be quite different to what was being mined at Gilbey's. What does right-sizing the plant sort of mean to you, and what are the sort of things that pop up in terms of like big capital items in addressing that?
Yeah, so right-sizing, it really comes back to the geology side of it, is having how many ounces have you got and what sort of time frame do you want, right? You don't want to process 1 million ounces in 6 months and run away. So it's really about sitting down with the accountants and the geos and saying, right, how many ounces do we need to have a decent amount of ounces produced a year for 10 years and so on. Now, for something like for the Dalgaranga plant, it's sitting there pretty much idle, as I understand it. It can do 2.5 million. If you've got a ore body that's a higher grade, but maybe it needs more residence time or needs a finer grind, you can play with your plant to achieve that. You just process less tonnes at higher grade, a little bit finer. So these things you can tweak without having to add capital. Again, I'm not intimate with their metallurgy, but there are things you could do, again, with a different ore body through an existing plant.
Is that running the millet on a campaign basis?
Things
like that? Or
I hate these sort of questions because as a metallurgist, you want to make as much metal as you can for the lowest cost possible, right?
Yes.
Now, if you're not running flat out, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
It's as easy as that. But
you might be constrained from mining.
You can't be constrained from mining, which happens from time to time. So what you would do the maths of, say 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off campaign milling versus just running a lot slower to get a finer grind and more residence time. So they're the sort of trade-offs you would do, the recovery versus fixed costs, because then your OPEX goes up too if you're doing on and off, because you still got people sitting around doing nothing.
Yeah.
So that's just the ball mill. When you say slowing down, that's leaving it in the ball mill longer to grind it.
Yeah, you just don't. Instead of doing 200 tonne an hour, you put 150 tonne an hour into your set point, You know, you can play with ball charge and water addition and stuff a little bit, or you just grind the absolute piss out of it, right?
Yeah.
And just get a really, really fine grind. So there's few things you can do around that.
Does the ball mill spin at the same speed every time? You just leave it leave it in there for longer?
90% of ball mills are fixed speed.
Yeah.
There are some variable speed ball mills. Almost all the SAG mills are variable speed, but they tend to play within a certain range.
Okay, so to grind it more, you have to just speed it up more, or you leave it in there for longer?
You leave it at the same. You don't change anything except for how much you put in there, right?
Okay.
So you've still got some amount of balls rolling around, but if you're doing 200 tonne an hour, that will go through at a certain rate and give you a certain grind size. Now, if you're doing 100 tonne an hour, it's going to sit in there effectively twice as long and give you a finer grind size.
Okay, so if you've got less dirt and more balls,
Yep.
that means it's grinding it finer because
It's got more energy to grind finer, yes.
Yeah, righto.
Yep. It's all about, so when we design mills, it's all about kilowatt hours per tonne, right? So it's how many kilowatts you've got in a mill versus how many tonnes you're going to do. And you do all the maths to say, right, at this tonnage rate, I will get this grind size. And to do that, I need this much power, right? Yeah. Now, if you want to get a finer grind size, you need either more power or less tonnes.
Gotcha.
Or if you want more tonnes, you've got to sacrifice grind size.
Is it a pretty reliable formula?
Yep.
Like, say, if I come to you and say, right, I want to go from 120 micron to 75 micron tomorrow.
Yep.
And is it pretty easy to figure out?
Yep, very. So it's a bond ball work index and rod mill work index. There's a couple of basic things that we've been developed over time. And a lot of guys have got big databases on them saying, right, the test work says this, the mill really did this, here's my line. So the answer is yes. Very, very easy engineering standard stuff, right?
Now, I remember when I was underground talking about, this is probably when you're talking about the relationship between the miners and the processing plant.
Yep.
She's been an argy-bargy for years because the miners don't give a flying fuck what goes into the mill.
No, they send up rock bolts and all sorts of mesh and shit and poly pipes and stuff.
And then the processing plant obviously a lot of them don't understand that you can't take most of the rock bolts out before it goes in there. But what is that effect just in the crusher? Or you can split belts and bloody everything?
Yeah, so crusher and downtime. Yep, so basically, you can split belts. You can rocks get blocked in your jaw, which is an absolute pain in the ass to clean out. You'll spend 2, 3, 4 shifts just getting rocks out of jaws that have got a rock bolt sitting perfectly underneath, so you can't get it through.
What do you need? Rock breaker to bloody
and some guys have rock breakers, some guys don't have rock breakers.
Yeah.
And then you got all the grid mesh, or the mesh just gets caught up in belts and around pulleys and stuff, and it's just all downtime, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what kills you.
And how does every mill have a magnet?
Yes.
Most of the time?
Yep. You'll have at least one.
Do they pick up everything, or do they sometimes miss things?
They sometimes miss things.
And why? Just from bad
Small
luck?
size. So you'll calibrate your magnet based on a certain size.
Yeah.
And if it's smaller than that size, it's not going to affect the rest of the process.
What's the worst thing that can go through a mill that might skip a magnet, like a drill steel that long?
Yeah, drill steel, mate. Yep.
Yeah, I've seen them bloody. And hey, mate, because I was about the companies. I was about the stock market. You see some dickhead throw a drill steel in the rocks. I'm like, mate, that could ruin the operation.
It takes out belts. You'll be down for days. Yep, that's a big issue.
Is that how, so when it tears a belt, we're talking possibly days, you're saying?
Yeah, we can do it pretty quickly these days, but you got to shut the crusher down. You got to ring old mate up to come and fix it for you. He's got to bring his people on site.
Yeah,
if it's a patch, it's one thing, but if it's a couple of meters and more, you're down for a day or two.
Any underground miners listening, do not chuck shit in the rock that doesn't need to be. There's enough shit in there already.
Please don't.
But
Please don't.
have you ever noticed when you were, observing a mill and downtime and everything, did you notice any difference between the rock bolts and mesh coming through, ones that were DSI branded and the one that's weren't? Did they behave differently? Because I've been told they do.
Right.
Yeah.
I've never paid that much attention, mate, to be brutally
I
honest.
think when you're up there next, and you're going through the scrap bin and what comes out of the magnet, I think you'll actually probably find that you'll see the DSI stuff go through the crusher and it just flies out.
Straight through, you reckon?
I don't even think the magnet picks it up. It just goes straight into the bin.
In the bin,
It's
yep.
just like it's actually magnetically attracted to get out because they actually design it. They actually design it that way to help, not just help the underground mining industry keep every underground mine bloody going. They actually design it to not ever cause a mill shutdown.
We would take that every day of the week, mate.
Well, they're not the biggest fucking ground support supply in the world by accident. This is the sort of R&D technology that they're putting in place. And that's why we plug them all the time. Because I want every mill to be going 100% of the time, 90% of the time.
Absolutely.
Right. Hey, thanks DSI for not just thinking about the underground mining industry, but thinking about the processing plants.
Thank you, DSI.
Thank you. That was Derek Hurd's initiative.
Good on you, Derek.
Good on you, Derek. Love your work, mate. If you're not bloody using DSI for your underground mine, one, you're a dickhead, and two, you're not helping your processing plant.
Well said, Matty.
You beauty.
I got one last one on gold for you, Nathan. And is it possible? Do you reckon? Like, let's say gold price, is forever into the future, $3,000 Aussie per ounce, like in real dollar terms. Is it possible to ever make Wiluna work again?
With the right ore body, yeah, absolutely. Like it's sunk infrastructure. There's capital there. It's got a good milling circuit. It's got tanks. It's got a brand new float circuit that was working well. So the answer is yes.
What does it need?
You need a good couple of grams per tonne ore body and lots of it. Yeah, in a perfect world, an oxide ore body would be fine in that application.
Yeah.
Can you make the Wiluna ore body work?
Well, my understanding was the Wiluna ore body was working. They were making a gold arsenic concentrate, and then they had to sell that concentrate. And I think some of the offtakes were probably Russia and China. And if a few things go there when you can't sell your product, that might hurt you, right? Mm. So Wiluna as an ore body has very high levels of arsenic, and the traders and the guys who want to buy your concentrate are very, very cognizant of arsenic levels these days, right? So they don't want to take high arsenic level products. Mm. But in terms of a metallurgical plant, sunk infrastructure, if you've got an ore body next door that's free milling, absolutely, no problems at all.
Guys, I'm keen to talk about nickel next.
Oh.
This market's just been flipped on its head in the past couple of years. And first up, I've got to ask you, you hear a lot about, tech advancements changing the industry and whatnot. Did you anticipate this coming, what's happened in Indonesia?
I didn't. So talking to guys in the industry years and years ago, when Indonesia said no more selling concentrates, that's it, everyone went, well, that's pretty fucking stupid. Mm. Like, why would you do that? Because they've got some really big mines over there, right? I don't think anyone saw the level of Chinese investment and then all the level that they went into, like the R&D to build all these big laterite plants, and that sort of caught us napping a little bit, I think. We went from going, probably, why did you guys do that, to, oh, shit.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, geez, we didn't think you'd be able to convert that 2 into 1, but shit, you have.
But yeah, so, because, again, we're very good at making concentrates. We've been doing it for ages, and then, some ore bodies let you, some ore bodies don't, but then when the government puts a ban on exporting concentrate, that's a pretty big thing, right? It's a lot of cash flow that you're not getting.
And what about these HPAL circuits? Like, they've been notorious in WA. Marion comes to mind. That took a long time to get right. Were there, real tech difficulties that you doubted in Indonesia?
Nickel's not really my forte, but a lot of the stuff in the HPAL, there's a lot of viscosity issues. Like the ore it's all laterite, so it's thick, it's cluggy, it's really terrible stuff to handle. You've got to run really, really low densities. It's just, you need to build big plants. So I don't know enough about it to sort of comment on the technical aspect of it, really.
Is that just, it's like fucking muddy,
it's just slop,
shit.
Absolute slop. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Close to surface crap.
Yeah, it's really thick and plasticine-y. Yeah.
Yeah, like Play-Doh.
On the flip side of the laterite projects, you've seen the sulfide projects in WA suffer, and quite a few have gone on care and maintenance now. And now you're starting to see some of these plants be repurposed. We've seen Ellison at MinRes talk about taking advantage of these latent assets, and they've picked up one now. What are the sort of things that come to mind in converting a nickel sulfide processing plant into a lithium plant?
Yeah, they're good questions, right? Because no one really knows. No one's done it before. So basically, the plants from the front end will be exactly the same. The crushers, the ball mills, up to the flotation point will be the same. They use very different reagents, so frothers and collectors are very different. And then one thing that a lot of guys haven't really tweaked yet or understand is that the salinity of the water around the goldfields is a big issue. I don't know if any guys have processed lithium on a commercial scale in hypersaline water.
Tell me about that. What is the pitfalls of the hypersaline?
Yeah, so the hypersaline
I
water.
can answer that.
I know.
There you go.
Do you want to test me?
Go for it, mate.
The hypersaline water disables the collector in the flotation, so it doesn't actually lift the lithium up. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. So
You
Okay.
beauty.
yeah, something like that. Yeah, so it's pretty much it. So
Say it properly
salty,
if you want.
the salty water, it's just full of different ions, right? And it reacts differently to the collectors and stuff, which the test work was probably not done in. So understanding that is important, and then also right sizing the flotation cells is also important. You know, I don't know how is it the Lake Johnson plant that they bought?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's got a couple of big cells or lots of little cells. You know, you'd have to do the test work for the process to understand it. But it's not a very straightforward thing as I understand it.
Mount Marion's probably the most well publicised one that puts out a much lower grade spodumene concentrate compared to other mines, and they had a flotation plant there. It doesn't appear that it gets used, but it was more interesting getting the head around the lower percentage concentrate going through DMS seems to indicate that, because even if you had you get a lower recovery going through a DMS because your shit's going out in fines, you should still get your DMS circuits might still put out a 5.5% spod con, but that's coming out at 3.8 just through DMS. So is that saying there's gang material locked in with the lithium, which is dropping the overall grade of
That's
the
all it can be,
concentrate?
mate. Yeah, that's all it can be.
So-
yes.
And how would you get around that, like ultra fine grinding to try and separate it, or it can't be separated, or?
Yeah, so that's where you'd have to do a lot of test work, right? So you'd get the tailings, you'd throw chemicals at it, you would do DMS under different grind sizes. There's lots of different things you could do to try and get that out. But the reason why the grade isn't as high is because, there's more gang minerals locked in with the concentrate.
Yeah.
They should build a bloody desal plant at Esperance and just send it north to Kalgoorlie.
Has been talked about.
Has it?
How big of a job if, like, say, how big's Mount Marion? Bloody, what's that? 3, 4? I don't know the tonnage rate of it. But do you know the answer? I thought you put your hand up. What? Like, say you got a 3 million ton plant and you wanted to build an RO plant to.
You can't RO that water. It's
you cannot RO
way
that.
too high TDS.
Right. So there's no way would a desal plant?
Right. So this is where I've got to ding, because I've got another business that treats water in the goldfields that removes magnesium and calcium, right, using a thing called nanofiltration.
Well, just explain
What
that.
a perfect segue.
That wasn't the point of coming on. So the problem with RO is the TDS of the water is so high around the goldfields, you can't
What's
produce
TDS?
total dissolved salts or solids, if you want to do it. So to set an example, seawater desalination runs at about 45,000 TDS, right? And it produces drinking quality water as the product, and that has about a 45% recovery. So you're still throwing away 50% of all the crap.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that's at 45,000 TDS. On the water around the goldfields, it's running, some places I've seen around Norseman, 280,000 TDS.
Jesus
but typically
Christ.
about 150,000 TDS. Right? So
Good if you had a sore throat, eh? You say Mum used to
The old
say
Epsom
bloody
salts.
gargle
Warm
salt
water.
gargle salt water.
If you're fasting, mate, you just have some salt in your happy days.
There you go.
You don't get.
So, and look, there's other sort of technologies you can do as well. So the stuff that we do is called nanofiltration. It's like the next step of RO. It's not as, you're not getting everything out. So all the divalents you're rejecting or the monovalent ions go through. So it's still salty, but it doesn't have magnesium and calcium and sulfates and stuff in there.
Nathan, we can talk about sponsorship after the show.
All right.
That'd be a good one. But
He won't need to. He's like, fuck it, I'll just come on and do it for free.
But I'd love another dingo before we proceed, if possible.
So that, oh yeah, good work.
Anyone else?
all good.
I'll take one if it's there, mate.
It's hiding right there.
Bloody, grab a bloody another. I'll have another can of cat piss if you bloody want the dingo.
No, I'm right for now. I'll
right.
sit on this until we're finished.
So what this this little technology that we've just come across that we actually didn't know about. You have told me about this before, but is it practical on a big scale?
Yes. Yep. It's just essentially an RO plant setup with modified membranes.
Yeah, and is that water would that be pure, in the case of lithium in the goldfields, would that purely be used just for the flotation circuit, or would you use it for your whole mine site? Can you supply the whole mine site with it?
You'd probably put it at the front of your circuit. Again, I don't know the details, but you'd probably put it right at the front, treat that water to start with, and then as you recycle water, it's still clean already.
When you say front of the circuit, like
before the ball mill, so it becomes your raw water source.
Hey, this little side hustle you got here, like we don't, mate. We'll give it the airtime you need. So that's coming from so it's in the goldfields.
Yep.
Coming out of those bloody like the paleo channels or whatever.
Yep.
So for you're going to do a lot of testing, aren't you?
Absolutely, we do, mate.
Do you need and that's still ongoing?
Yep.
So you probably need a bit more water. So water reliability is a big thing for you.
Huge.
I know a guy that is a absolute expert at bloody drilling through the absolute clay pus and shit in the goldfields into those paleo channels to find that water for you.
Beautiful.
Mate, you need to give James at WA Water Bores a bell.
Give him a call.
I'll give you his number, mate. That is their niche.
All
the
right.
Goldfields paleo channels, setting up water bores. They got the bloody customised air core rig. They find the deepest spot of the paleo channel. It's like water exploration. Then they get the mud rotary in. And like, mate, a lot of people, absolutely. If someone gets a contract offering to go to the Goldfields for water exploration, they're like, it's a bit bloody no good. Because these guys that's their niche. So they've just, they're pretty much like the bloody, I don't know.
Imagine if you
Who
joined.
would you say? They're like the John Jones of like, he bloody held onto the light heavyweight title in friggin' UFC for years. No one could beat him.
Yeah, I was going to say they're like the DSI, but for...
They're like the DSI, John Jones, probably not even Jordan because LeBron's sort of there. Like John Jones is just up here.
If you combined WA water bores with your initiative, mate, you'd have unlimited bloody
Good water.
unlimited good water in Goldfields. Fuck.
So WA water bores, they'll get the water, guaranteed 100, and they actually find it 100% of the time. Feed your testing and pretty much saving the whole Goldfields lithium flotation industry.
Sounds so easy, doesn't it?
It's not just lithium, mate.
What a bloody partnership.
Just click the ticket,
I
Matty.
can see it already. James at WA Water Bores is going to get you your water, and any other bastard that wants water in the goldfields, give these
Or
guys
anywhere.
a call. They're absolute bloody gurus.
That's it. Get in the
Or
show
anywhere.
notes. Get in the show notes. The email address is there. Get in touch.
Bloody love your work.
There's another company in the area there, which their water use in Kalgoorlie has been well documented, and that's Linus, and they are building a rare earths plant, which is
Cracking and leaching.
not easy as it goes. So, what are your sort of thoughts on the capacity for them to be successful in this?
Is that a phone call you won't pick up?
From those guys.
You're like, no, that's way too hard.
Too hard. Now you really get into chemistry plants, right? This is a whole different level. So, and water quality in cracking plants is critical. So you would need to source very, very good quality water because otherwise it just fucks with your chemistry if you have all these really weird ions floating around. So
Mate, even before you get into it, what is cracking and leaching?
cracking and leaching is just basically you've got the solid, you basically leach it in acid rather than cyanide and you leach everything out that way.
Yeah.
Or if you crack it, you add like a step before that heats it or opens up the mineral to the acid.
Ah, righto. Okay.
Almost like an autoclave type setup.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. They get the concentrate from Mount Weld, send it to the cracking leaching facility. Apparently, supposedly, but given the developments of Malaysia, they might just keep sending the con to Malaysia, and who knows what happens to Kalgoorlie. But speaking of the water issues in the goldfields, mate, if that plant gets idled, you just want to buy their water rights, wouldn't you?
Oh, water's going to be a big thing going forward, not just for Kalgoorlie, but in everywhere, right? In the mining industry, we're sort of being forced to make sure that we're doing the right thing with water globally, right? So tailings dams, water reuse and stuff, it's beginning, it needs a lot more traction.
So when you think about your your personal investment portfolio, rare earth seems to be one of the hardest when it comes to getting the met right. What are the other commodities that come to mind when you think met difficult?
Yeah, so rare earths definitely, right, because a lot of the minerals you want are very similar to the minerals you don't want, right? So metallurgically, you got to play with some pretty funky chemistry to make that happen. Rare earths is one.
That's like separating all of these
separating them, So making
elements.
a concentrate.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got two minerals that are very similar, except one has rare earth attached to it and one doesn't, metallurgically, you need to separate them.
And Mount Linus is an interesting one because they've got a giant niobium kind of resource themselves, which is completely like null and void as a result of the inability to separate it, as I understand.
And niobium's another one. That sort of seems to be the catchphrase at the moment for a lot of guys. The WO1, I think it is.
Yep. Ding, ding, ding.
Okay.
Yep.
Found this niobium. Yeah, the metallurgy on that, in my opinion, will be a process. It'll be learning. You know, so I wouldn't be surprised if their first recovery is around the 50, 60% mark to achieve a good concentrate.
Which isn't abnormal for that commodity.
No, that's right. Yep. So the thing that they've got going for them, though, is their grade is off the charts, right?
Yep.
So grade forgives a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you can run a really high head grade, even at shit recovery, you'll still make money.
And my understanding is that 50 or 60 would be pretty positive.
Oh, I think that'd be very well welcomed.
Yeah, so you're not the first person that has said it's going to be a real process for them. They're going to be learning. And does that sort of go into your thinking with the initial met test work that's going to come out in the next half year or so? You perhaps take them with a pinch of salt and think this is going to be an iterative process?
Yeah, that's how I would look at it. Like whatever they put out can only get better, right? So they would have picked a certain set of conditions, whether it's pH, density, even the frothers and collectors that they use is some unique stuff. A lot of it comes out of China. You've got it's called hydroxamates and amines and fatty acids and all this really cool chemistry. A lot of their suppliers add a bit of pixie dust in there so no one can copy it. But so yeah, I think it'd be iterative, right? So you'll do some test work on what you think will work. You'll get those results. Then you go, right, I'm going to add more of this. I'm going to add less of that. And then you'll just keep tweaking it until you get a flow sheet that works for you.
But it's a bit of a balance with this one because there's a lot of interest in it. And like you said earlier on, you got to be commercial. You know, you got to come up with a good result in a way. So to tie that into WA1's thinking, do you think they try and do a huge amount of tests in that initial test phase to try and get as close to what it might look like?
I would, if that was my project and I had the cash to spend on met test work. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, I would look at what my ore body is, grab as many drill samples or core or whatever I can get my hands on, send it to a met lab, and just let them go to town.
So I think the current approach is just the one sample to start with. They've kind of picked this one zone of the deposit. I think it's just one. I reckon
it's probably real high grade.
You're rude, not to.
And so, I mean, like, is that an approach to, you know, initial met work that you would typically be like, that's a bit of a red flag, or like, how do you interpret that?
Again, it depends how much money they've got, but you'd want to do at least a handful of tests under different conditions, right? So if somebody gives you the ore, you would research niobium flotation and go, right, these are the conditions. I'm going to do a couple of tests. You wait a couple of weeks, get the results, and then go, right, that looks shit, or that looks good. I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to start doing this, and just keep sort of fixing it up that way.
How do you think about the costs of doing met test work versus...
Oh, we're cheap as. We're really cheap.
Cheap and not available.
Just tell me your price, mate.
What up? Okay, so if you go, let's go the leaderboard or the I guess it's the bloody, if you flip it upside down. If you're going to say like rare earth cracking and leaching, lithium flotation, refractory gold, niobium, what would you class as like, right, most difficult going down?
Rare earth cracking and leaching. That's
most difficult?
Yeah. So
chuck uranium in there for me.
Bit of uranium too, mate. There you go. No problems. So rare earths, everyone just used to make a concentrate. And we're good at doing that generally. Rare earths, not so much, but we can make a concentrate. And we just ship it to China. It's what we've been doing forever, and we do it well. It's the chemistry that comes after that that's really, really sensitive, and we don't really understand well. There's some stuff happening in the US on some projects there that they're spending a lot of money on, and my understanding is they're getting there. But it's a new technology that we don't understand yet. Whereas making concentrates, like I mentioned before, copper, gold, lead, zinc, float cons, you get heaps of mets, heaps of engineers, we can do that easy. So rare earths, for me, would be the top one. Lithium would be similar. We can make a spod con. That's pretty not straightforward, but we can do that. It's then the downstream processing. How do we leach it? What do we use? Is it a shit ton of acid? Under what conditions? Is it a lithium carbonate? What all these different things come into play.
Where
pure
would
chemistry.
flotation sit before?
Pretty easy,
Not too bad.
relatively easy.
But why the big long ramp up for Pilbara and that? Just because it's more new.
Probably because it's new.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not sure what they had installed, but
And the iron that kind of causes recovery issues as well. Is that right?
yeah, that would just cause you issues with your final grade.
Yeah.
And then recovery as well. So.
Yeah. And so are we classing niobium as rare earths?
Well, it's in that sort of range. It's I believe it's a niobium oxide. Don't quote me, but I think that's what we're trying to.
Niobium
and oxide floats.
Niobium pentoxide, yeah.
Niobium or oxide floats are generally quite hard to do. You know, sulfide minerals, we've got the chemical suite down pat. We know how to process it. We know how to tweak things. Oxide float, not so much.
What about nickel laterite, HPAL or POX?
Yeah, I think we know how to do it. It's just the costs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you think about IGO's hydroxide plant, the Albemarle one, that they were meant to be humming by 2019, the earliest ones. They're still having difficulties. Do you think that's just going to continue for a while?
Yeah. Again, I'm not intimate with it, but yeah, it would be right. If you're having issues now, a lot of the times you'll identify you need capital to fix that issue, and you can't just go and buy something tomorrow and plumb it in. You got to plan it. You got to design it. You got to procure it. You know, if it was a quick fix, they would have done it by now.
And we lack that capability in WA. Like the common theme with all this stuff is, we're good at the upstream stuff, but we're not WA's got no chemists, no little people with the chemistry set capability that's required for.
We have skill sets in unis and stuff like that, but from a commercial operational point of view, I think we're lacking a little bit in terms of that side of things.
And probably the ease of deploying shitloads of capital when they need it, because they just get crucified for it.
Yep.
China deploys capital. Who gives a shit?
Doesn't matter. Yeah, that's right.
No one cares.
Yeah.
What about the BHP, the nickel sulfate plant? Because that has not been a success from what I've been told.
Again, I don't know much about it, but it'd be in a similar sort of boat, right? It's new sort of stuff that no one's really done before.
Yeah.
They would have been given a chunk of cash. They would have done some test work and said, we can do it. They built it and went, oh, fuck.
We're BHP.
Did you ever look at any of the SOP projects in West Australia?
Here we go.
No, I stayed away from all those, mate.
Well fucking played. They were chemistry sets, which
very much so.
And speaking of float cells, like you said, the float plant at Mount Marion's not being used. Like the float cells literally did no salts fucking precipitated. Like there was no nothing went through the float cells. It was just
You could have made some coin there, mate, if you got in there.
SO4.
You mightn't have got paid, but
I do have one of those at the moment. Get it. Anyway, sorry, I should have stuck that in there. Yeah.
And I'm keen to explore. Like there's
that's one of those boards we mentioned too every now and then.
Oh, classic. Yeah, and like I put a tweet out before you came in, Nathan, about a lot of projects that may have at one point had a bit of hype and then Met kind of just took the wind out of them. And you're pretty succinct in your talking, so I'm keen to kind of get your perspectives on some of them to the extent you have knowledge. Mt Todd.
Yep. Hard as fuck.
Why?
Just as a mineral, it's really, really hard. So it's hard and abrasive.
Yeah.
So you need a lot
Harder
of
than Bellevue?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. Yep.
Yep.
It's Mt Todd to me. It's one of those ones where the gold price is doing good when Mt Todd gets a rebirth. Right? Just a personal opinion. I don't know if you want to put that on air, but
that's great.
That's just how how I see it. So it's really, really hard, reasonably low grade. So you need a lot of energy to get the gold out.
What do you think?
Well, on Bellevue, because it's bloody hard, but are they? Because it's a quartz, it's in like a quartz vein. Like, does the hard shit sort of? How does that work? Like because it's like when you got a quartz vein in the guts, which should break up pretty bloody easy. It's very brittle, but then you got hard rock around it. And obviously some of that's going to come through from the stope, like the planned dilution of the stope.
Yep.
How does that affect the circuit? Like, because it's going to, that quartz material that usually contains a lot of the gold, I think it's quartz.
Yep, that's right.
But that'll break up pretty easily. And then
Yep.
there's other big shit around it.
So a
What
lot of it
happens
comes back
there?
to how good the underground miner guys are and how big your vein is, right? So, if you...
But there's always going to be some come through.
Yeah, it doesn't really impact the plant that much if you've designed for that hardness.
Yeah. So when you say design for that hardness, is it what are those designs that are put in place to crush really hard material?
Yeah, so it comes back to what we're talking about, the milling power, right? So when you do all the test work, you do all your hardness and comminution test work, which will tell you how much energy you need to take a rock from this size to that size.
Yeah.
You then size the plant to give you a certain throughput, and whatever the ore coming in, it'll be in that sort of range. Assuming the samples you've taken are the correct samples, you won't have any problems. It'll just go through the plant to the design specs.
Yeah. Yeah. And
It's when you don't expect it that it brings your throughput right down.
So, and what's the implications of when Bellevue send their dirt to Gwalia to process?
Mm-hmm.
And even though, that was I think that was a lot of oxide dirt, so it might be a bit different. But toll treating, everyone talks about toll treating. Oh, we can just toll treat it there. But from what I've been told, it's a fucking pain in the ass, because if you send hard material to a plant that's not designed for it,
Yep.
they might get a bit of money for toll treating it, but then they're
Recoveries.
doing replacing bloody things on the crusher because it wears everything out a lot quicker than it's designed. Is that a big problem that doesn't really get publicised that much?
That happens a lot of different toll treatments, right? It's not unique sort of stuff. It's, you'll have a mine that has a stranded plant, and then everyone wants to send their dirt there, right? But the plant only has a certain amount of power and has a certain amount of residence time. Like that's it, right? Now, if your ore fits within that parameters, happy days, right? But if your ore is heaps harder, if it needs a lot longer residence time, or it has to be ground a lot finer, then you need to accept that you'll get shit recoveries through that plant for that parcel you give them. It just is. Like, you can't change that plant too much.
Yeah. And another one that springs to mind about toll trading is the gold at Mt Ida for Delta Lithium. So from looking at the results, and I think historically as well, very high copper content.
Yep, absolutely.
Which would be extremely limiting on who you could toll treat that with, pretty much, besides Deflector, which is far away.
Yeah, no, the Mt Ida ore body, I think everyone knows, is full of copper. It was a little standalone plant, I believe in the mid-2000, 2008, 2010, they tried to put a parcel through. Didn't go well.
Yeah. And how hard is it to put a float plant on a gold plant?
How much money you got?
Is it what's it cost to, if you got high copper and you want to float it?
If you got high copper, it has to be a sulfide mineral first. If you've got high copper and it's a malachite or azurite, you can't float it. You're fucked, right? But if it's a chalcopyrite, you can float it into a concentrate.
Right. So so Deflector.
Yep.
That's high copper, but
It'll probably be chalcopyrite or a sulfide copper mineral.
okay. So are you saying you cannot, if it is malachite or azurite,
Yep.
you can't
You can't float it because it's an oxide. It won't float.
Okay. How do you process it?
Not with a gold plant.
Oh, yeah. So you just can't.
You can't. You physically can't.
So you're saying you cannot get the gold out of that
But you can, but you'll also then
without
get all the
chewing a shitload of
No, you
cyanide.
can't.
Yeah, right. So
If you can work out a way, let me know, and we'll make billions. But
right. So you can't create a concentrate of anything. Like, you just can't do anything.
Nope. Oxide copper in a gold ore body is not good.
Yeah, right. So, and that malachite and azurite are oxide
Oxide
copper.
species. So you'll know, a lot of the geos, you'll know it's a blue and green. So if you go up to a stockpile and it's got blue and green rocks through it, at a gold mine, I'll just turn around and just keep going out.
Yeah, right. So if it's just that as a copper
Yep.
without gold,
You would leach it with acid,
you leach it.
like a nifty.
Yeah, righto.
Yep.
Can you leach it out before you bloody...
Yeah, but then technically we can do anything, right? Commercially, not so much, right?
Yeah.
So you would have to add heaps of acid to get the copper out first.
Yeah.
Then you'd have to wash all the acid and stuff out. Then you would have to slurry it up in a high pH with cyanide. You'd have to have separate tailings dams. You'd have to have separate water circuits. It's not that easy.
Yeah, right. How do they usually disclose these gold mines with a bit of copper in it? They usually disclose what the copper bearing mineral is.
a lot of the times I've found a lot of the geos don't even know that that's an issue. They just go, gold, bit of copper, we're fine, but look at the gold.
Yeah.
Right? So I've actually started educating a lot of geos that it does matter. Like if it's malachite and azurite or even bornite, chalcocite, you've got problems. If it's chalcopyrite, you can manage it to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, they generally don't do too much mineralogy around the copper species in a gold ore body. Wow. Generally.
Wow.
Interesting.
There's another project I want to get your overrated, underrated thoughts on, and that is Chalice's Julimar project. So made the news obviously quite a bit last year, the scoping study. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not a fan. Like it's some very low grade coppers and I think nickel as well, like that. And it's hard to make really good concentrates unless you pull the PGEs with that into a good concentrate. Again, I'd have to look at the test work and I don't know anything about it, but I would think it wouldn't be that easy to make a really good concentrate if you've got a lot of oxide in transition of within that ore body.
And they also had the water issue, I believe.
Yeah, so again, I don't know. I'm not into it with the project, but you need to have somebody to put a tailings dam. You need to get water to come in there. So, yeah, and usually when I see projects talk about metal equivalent, I don't like that, right? They go, it's a nickel equivalent, gold equivalent, silver equivalent. It depends on how you've done your maths to make that number look good.
Is the solution to talk about net smelter return?
NSR is a good one because that's, from a dollar point of view, that's what you're going to get, right? But first you've got to be able to make a concentrate that you can sell.
Yeah, yeah.
And generally, the lower the grade, the harder it is to make a con.
Yeah. It's kind of circling back a little bit to lithium world. I keep hearing that, metallurgy and lithium.
Fucking have another sip of
Matters
that,
a
mate,
lot.
while you're there.
Matters a lot. What's the one thrown around? It's like, Unithara is apparently really good for met, but, the grade is like, well, it's not like
That's like
grade.
0.8%.
Yeah, so you hear sort of statements like that. I don't know how to falsify or verify those sorts of statements, but when people say statements like that, what does that actually mean? Like,
It's just how does it, I guess, relate back to the met test work that's been done. So if you've got a coarse-grained lithium deposit, you should get good DMS recoveries, right? If it's really, really fine-grained, it won't work as well. You won't have to go down the flotation path.
Well, which I think the North American ones are sort of claiming that they've got very big crystals, so they're going to get a good DMS recovery, don't need float. Different to Kathleen Valley or Andover's pretty fine from what I've heard as well.
Yeah, so that's where the geology comes into play. It's the size of the crystals. It's the same in copper and lead and flotation, right? If you've got a coarse-grained, pure chalcopyrite, you'll make an easy concentrate, right? But if it's really fine-grained stuff like MacArthur River, you've got to grind the absolute shit out of it. You've got lead, you've got zinc. So it comes back to the geology and what the minerals are first.
How do you reckon Kathleen Valley's going to go with whole of ore flotation?
It's going to be fun to watch. It's one of those ones, again, as a metallurgist, I'd love to be there to play with it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what do you play with?
Heaps of stuff. You play with water addition, you play with densities, you play with flows to different places, you take it back to the mill, you play with different grind sizes, you can add different chemicals. There's heaps of stuff you can do.
Yeah. And God, you wouldn't even sleep. You'd be on 24-hour shifts. You'd just be like, what do? You're just looking at the bloody, you just got your head over the tank the whole time?
Yeah, no, tank. We've also got these little things that you can trend now. They tell you what's in the mineral, so you know trend's coming up, trend's coming down.
Yeah. Okay, so when it's going through that flotation circuit, what is the real-time analysis on the recovery? How is it done?
Yeah, so you've got it's got an OSA or some sort of online analyzer, and that will take your concentrate grade, your feed grade, and your tails grade out as an absolute minimum, right? So you'll say, right, the dirt coming in is 2% copper. Going out, it's 0.2% copper. You're doing pretty good.
And how does it assay it?
It just does it through X-rays and that sort of stuff.
Okay, righto. And same with lithium?
Don't know. But I would think there'd be something like that.
Yeah.
Or you'd be running to your lab every 20 minutes to try and get it assayed.
God, it'd be. And so and it's not a matter of like when you know it's going to shit, you can't just stop everything.
No. Float circuits need to be steady state.
Yeah.
They love steady state and don't change too many things at once. I've been to too many plants where you have a young met who's keen as, and they go, just turn the air up, I'll turn the frother down, and I'll put a bit more collector on. Oh, shit. You don't know what the change was. So it's really about understanding what your circuit does and the different things that you change, the outcomes it will give you.
And then a day shift met and a night shift met. There becomes Mets are very Mets.
Yeah,
you
we
get different
tend not
Mets.
to have night shift Mets. You'll have your night shift operators,
Okay.
and every operator I ask knows exactly how to run the plant, and those fuckers on night shift have got no idea. It happens everywhere I go. It's just, this is how I run my plant, and they'll change it. And then the night shift guys will come and go, Matty's got no idea, and they'll change it back.
Yeah, right.
Which is why, as Mets, we try and automate everything.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so interesting.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's just one of those. And they're not wrong. They're just different ways of running the show, and everyone believes that that's their way that they run their circuit.
Should there be on a lithium flotation plant like a Kathleen Valley or whatever? Should you have a Met on night shift?
Yeah, I would in the first 3 to 6 months. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
and is
And you will through commissioning. You'll have Mets, skilled operators on day shift, night shift across different crews specifically for that task.
Yeah. And what is it possible to have it pretty bloody automated
Yep.
eventually?
Yeah, it depends on how much money you've got up front, but absolutely, you can automate air addition, you can automate collector addition, you can automate levels of your hoppers. You've even got cameras to see what the bubbles look like.
Yeah.
You can automate the shit out of anything completely.
And is that all based on there'd have to be some sort of algorithm or formula
Yep.
going into that to know the effect of everything and based on the real-time assaying?
Yeah, the real-time assaying, and then operators in the control room will have graphs and info in front of them, and they'll be able to see if your tails is coming up or tails is going down, that they've done the right thing. You know, you might get a spike in head grade, so you've got a chance to fix up your plant to capture that spike. Or if your con grade's gone to shit, you got to try and work out why. You know, you run out and check your chemical addition or find out why it's changed.
Yeah.
So in real time, you'll be able to see exactly what each stream is doing.
Isn't it funny that the people that are responsible for that, whether they know the impact of everything they do on the stock market,
Massive.
but that is like
Mate,
the fucking what comes out the arse end of that plant, and that recovery number is what that whole company gets judged upon.
You thought you were the
usually.
bottleneck as the bloody jumbo
Oh,
operator,
mate, I'm
but-
just good for fuck all compared to that. Like, but I don't know if they actually, and that'd be such a tough culture to get in a company when they're just on a salary, because especially in a lithium plant, finding, and I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure there's your bloody good eggs and your bad eggs, but finding people that bloody are fully aligned and care about that bloody what's coming out that arse end.
But Matt, that comes to any job. You got to incentivize your people well. It's
Yeah,
same as
pay them
you,
all in shares.
Well, it's the same as you as a jumbo operator. You incentivize them on meters and whatnot. You know,
Cash.
At the end of the day, it's always cash.
Cash.
But, you know, on output and whatnot.
And a lot of mine sites do, right? So, you know, there'll be part of their salary be based on share options and stuff, and the plant performs. And then as the management team, you go around saying, right, it's pretty simple. If that mill is spinning, we're making money.
Yeah.
It is really as easy as that, right? If that mill stopped for any length of time that it's not supposed to be, we're not making money. It is as simple as that.
I'm keen to rattle off a bunch of projects. Nathan.
Oh, here we go.
And these have been kindly offered to us by the Money Miner audience. So
It's either underrated,
Yeah.
overrated, or can't talk about
All
it.
right.
yeah,
Can't
yeah,
talk about it.
There's probably some you can't.
you can politely pass on some. So Rockland's Cadeco back in the day in Queensland.
Back in the day,
Yeah,
overrated.
yeah.
Yep.
What's the one line?
Poorly designed. Yeah. Just,
Yeah.
No, not a fan.
That's the first time I've
Woodlawn.
ever heard you ask someone to expand on the overrated.
I want to
underrated.
reply. I want to learn. What about
Woodlawn?
Can't talk because I was involved. Underrated.
Yep.
Okay.
Abra.
Can't talk.
Yep. Namdini, which is Cardinal in Africa. So that was it was bloody flying until Met results came in. It turned out well for shareholders. And
I
whatnot.
don't know is it gold, copper?
Gold.
Yeah, in Ghana.
Don't know, mate.
Ultra
Overrated.
fine.
It's a
Was it
Ghana.
refractory or was it grade? What was
Oh,
what
jeez.
killed it?
I can't remember, but it came back. Shareholders got a takeover in the end by the Chinese, who
Indeed.
went off against
Was,
the Russians.
Yeah,
Yeah.
massive bidding
Probably a
war.
coup.
There was ultra fine grinding from
Yeah,
my
so-
memory.
Anytime you got to do that sort of stuff, yeah, probably underrated.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know the asset.
How big are you into uranium? Have you done much work in that
Nah,
space?
I've done a little bit in Namibia, token amounts, but nothing that I could hang my hat on.
Well, I won't quiz you on them.
Avebury nickel?
Underrated.
Why?
I mean, overrated.
Overrated. Why?
Way overrated.
Tell me.
So there's some mineralogy stuff in there where as I said, arsenic is an issue in a lot of ore bodies. And it's my understanding that at certain levels in that plant, the nickel mineral is a nickel arsenate, right? So you can't take the arsenic minerals out of your concentrate because it is the mineral.
Nifty.
Yeah, that's a tough one, that asset. It's been flogged to death for many, 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 many years, right? Yep.
Yeah.
But they, Diabella when they took the cream, they made a bit, didn't
Yep,
they?
probably. Yep.
Yeah.
And it's been hard work ever since.
Another one that's been in a bit of strife lately, we haven't talked about mineral sands, but Strandline's Coburn project.
Oh, mineral sands is something I know nothing about. I tried to do some work with them ages ago, and they make you sign NDAs and non-disclosure agreements this big.
New Century Resources, their zinc project.
I'm probably neutral on that one.
Yep.
Yep.
Renison, Metals X. Metals
10.
10.
Yeah, probably neutral.
What's the bloody... oh, mate, did you know the Hillgrove mine?
Yeah, the antimony mine.
Yeah.
Yep. That's probably neutral again, right?
Doable.
Yeah, you would think so under the right conditions. Yep.
Yeah. That was my first ever job.
Hillgrove, there you go.
Yeah, Love Autos are going back in there. I don't know how many people have gone back in there, but...
Yeah.
Some of those little projects, if you run them lean and mean with the right crew and don't try and grow, you'll just make steady money for a while, right?
Here's an interesting one. Green bushes. Based on, there's a bit of a study that, what was it, an independent report that came out saying that
Recovery's going to get tougher.
recoveries were getting tougher or not as good and being probably masked by how high grade it was up on it.
I wouldn't be surprised. Again, that would come back to the geology and how it changes within the ore body, right?
And probably more so when you've got the highest grade mine in the world, highest grade spodumene deposit in the world, and you're making shitloads of cash. Is there the pressure to optimise the plant?
Generally, no. No, it's when the asset needs to run everything smooth is when you really cut your costs.
Yeah.
You know, we saw that in iron ore 5-6 years ago, right, where the price dropped and all the big boys just started cutting costs left, right, and centre to really good levels. And then when the price kicks up again, you make heaps of cash. But you didn't do it until you had to.
Totally. Yeah. It's funny how we respond to incentives so clearly. what I got one.
What's something
one
else
last
real
one.
fucking shit?
What is actually a good project that has never really been run well, but you can see there's levers you could pull as a Met to really kind of, create value.
That's an interesting one. I've done a little bit of work up Lehigh.
Yep.
Yep. Amazing asset, right? The ore body stuff's there. There's things around the plant you could probably do, but you would just really need to focus heavily on it to really make it hum. But it makes heaps of money anyway, right? So
So the incentive's never quite there because
No.
you're just printing already.
Yeah, it's a good little ore body. The plant's pretty good.
Jeez, that'd be the go if you actually went in there and say, I'll do these tweaks, but I'll get 50% of it.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
And you can keep 50.
Yeah, we'll take the rest.
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
be nice, but I don't know how people would be respond to that.
I got one last one. Are there any widely held views around metallurgy that sort of, rub you the wrong way? They're just wrong.
Yeah, people call it a metallurgist. Metallurgy, yeah. That's probably going to get a few hits, but yeah, it's always been metallurgist. No, not really. It's a good career. Lots of different aspects to it. So
Do you get what about getting called a mill rat?
that's fine. I'm happy with that.
You like it?
The
Well, there you
funniest thing about being a metallurgist is it's a great way to kill a conversation when you're having a barbecue with people you've never met before.
go.
You're
You're
sitting
like,
around a table or a fire and a few beers, and what do you do? I'm a metallurgist. Oh. Or they go, oh, the weather, huh? You're like, no. So,
Well, my last project one for you, Mirabella Nickel, which
yeah, that was in Brazil, huh?
correct.
Yeah, I don't know much about it.
Yep.
They went under?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
there's
Disaster.
your answer.
Yes, yeah.
Beautiful.
Fuck, I bet you I'll bloody walk out and be like, wish I asked about this. Well, now that you've been, we've popped your cherry, you'll be back on anyway.
happy to come back if anyone actually listens to this podcast. More than happy to come back on.
Well, you're a genuine guest that enjoys talking about something that doesn't want any work. That means I don't want any promotion.
Yeah.
I just want to actually talk about it.
I don't have a website. All my paraphernalia doesn't have any phone numbers or emails, nothing.
We won't even write yet. We'll just write XXX in the bloody in the description.
Only contact Nathan if you want clean water in the goldfields.
Maybe that might be the bloody. Are you ever going to bloody retire out of it, or you?
I tried to retire 2009.
Yeah.
And it didn't really work.
Didn't go too well.
No, it didn't go too well. No, it's but now I just consult for myself, helping out clients where I can. Right, that's pretty much the way it works.
Right, bloody Stoits, we'll let you go, mate.
That is definitely one I'm going to listen back to.
Much appreciate, mate.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to write it, get a bloody transcript and study it.
Thank you, mate. It's been really, really insightful for us coming from a very low base.
Bloody beautiful. Do you know who we've got to thank the partners. We'll test how much you listen. Do you know any of them?
I do. Anytime Exploration Services, K-Drill, Brooks, GetWet.
This is fucking good.
The two we just did.
Two we just did.
DSI, WA Waters.
DSI, Water, and Silverstone.
Wow.
Verify.
One more.
Verify.
Mate, what a loyal listener. Hoodaroo, Money Miners.
The information contained in this episode of Money of Mine is of general nature only and does not take into account the objectives, financial situation or needs of any particular person. Before making any investment decision, you should consult with your financial advisor and consider how appropriate the advice is to your objectives, financial situation and needs.